In today's episode, we're talking about giving the customer a seat at the senior leadership table.
From EngageMint, I'm David Millay, and this is Flip the Switch.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Flip the Switch, where we sit down with leaders in customer experience and employee experience, and we try to figure out what are the trends that they're paying attention to? What are the experiments that they're running? What are the principles that have guided them to success throughout their career? And then we apply all those insights to the world of sports and entertainment. Now, today, I am really excited for this episode because we are sitting down with a senior leader at an MLS club who is in a new role that has never existed before within the league. And it's a role that I've never heard of before in a sports team in any league. And that is, we are sitting down with Shawn McIntosh, the Chief Fan Officer for Charlotte FC. A little bit about his background, because Shawn is not just a super fan for Charlotte FC. He really has a background as a senior leader in sports and entertainment. So he's coming at this role with a unique approach. Before his role as Chief Fan Officer, he was the Chief Revenue Officer for the Norfolk Admirals. Before that, he was the Director of Ticket Sales and Service for the Las Vegas Aces. And before that, he worked at Houston Dynamo as their Director of Ticket Sales, Senior Manager of Inside Sales. So he understands at a really inherent level how Major League Soccer clubs and how professional sports organizations and sports and entertainment organizations drive revenue. And ultimately, we can't have nice things without fans. Fans pay for everything. And he understands that, but he understands the intricacies of how the process works, how things get done within sports organizations. And he's bringing the fans' voice into all of that. Ultimately, in his role, he's elevating the voice of the fan and giving them a seat at the senior leadership table so that when decisions are being made at the highest level, the fan has a voice. It's a really unique concept that they're experimenting with at Charlotte FC. So we wanted to sit down with Shawn and learn all about how things work at their organization. Now, quick background, couple terms that Shawn's going to use. He's going to use the word supporter a lot. That's not a normal fan. A supporter is kind of a super fan that tends to be really organized. So just something for you to keep in mind before we get into it. One more thing before we jump in. Shawn has only been in this role for about a month. So some of the things we talk about, he can't really get into because he might not have experienced it yet, or because the club is keeping it close to the vest. But with that said, let's jump into this episode. Really excited for you guys to learn from my friend, Shawn McIntosh. Shawn, welcome to the show.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Katie, for having me on.
So for everybody, we are really excited to get into this episode with Charlotte FC's new Chief Fan Officer. Why don't we start there? Shawn, what the heck is a Chief Fan Officer? Talk to us about some of your responsibilities with the club now.
Yeah, the $1 million question. It's exciting because it is such a new creative position. So the best way I can frame it is that my role here is to act as two pieces. One is to be that ear, first of all, so making sure that I'm above anything, listening to what fans are saying, what they're talking about, and then to act as that voice inside of the front office. So my job, to be really clear, is not, I'm not a cheerleader, I'm not a paid fan of the club. My job is to make sure that in every decision that's being made across all departments, that I'm making sure to push forward what the fans are saying, and that their interests are upheld, and making sure that, as a club, we always keep that top of mind. So that's really, amongst other things, that's the major focus of my role.
I maybe I didn't want to get this nitty gritty this fast, but we're going to do it. So, on that note about being the voice for the fans, you had a big letter that you wrote to the fans explaining your role and kind of your promise to them. And the promise was that the voice is going to be heard far beyond Bank of America Stadium. And talk to us about how specifically you're bringing their voice to the table with senior leaders. Like, what are the actual strategies and tactics for doing that?
Yes. So first, it's communicating back and forth with our supporters and our fans, and that happens That's not a monthly thing. That's not a Q&A session. That's not me, occasionally writing to the fans and taking submissions. Those things happen, but it's honestly like an every minute thing. I mean, I'm literally answering DMs on Twitter at like 11:30 p.m. And so I'm having those conversations. I'm listening. I've got phone calls. We have meetings, and I'm getting a pulse for what they're saying, things that they like, things that they may want us to do better, ideas, suggestions. And when you don't see me on podcasts or on TV or media or at events meeting our fans, I'm behind the scenes. I'm working a normal front office job in which I'm in meetings with marketing, sales, analytics, you name it, across the board, and I'm in there with our executives talking about strategy and how we're going to launch this, and making sure that what I hear, because we all know fans are important. Like, clearly, this isn't this isn't as if Charlotte FC understands that fans are important and nobody else does. It's just that while things like surveys and collecting data and understanding what fans want, what they're saying, all that's important, and you've got to do those traditional data capture measures. But for us, like, fans are living, they're breathing, they're changing their mind, they're speaking on things every moment of every day. And so my job is to make sure that's front and center and none of it gets lost, because it's really easy to live in your silo, and whether you're in sales or marketing, just to think exactly in your narrow window. It's not that you don't think fans are important, it's just that you tend to put your head down and think of your goals. And so my job is to make sure that in meetings, during campaigns and strategy conversations, that is never lost on the club. And I think that's a huge testament to this leadership, to this ownership, to see that, understand it, and understand the value and importance of what fans are saying every single day, not just when something goes wrong, not just when it's convenient, that it's in the DNA of this club.
I love it. So I don't want to go this nitty gritty this early, so we're going to take it back a little bit high level. But I want to talk about meeting structure. We'll talk about that, like exactly what kind of meetings you set up, difference between you owning it versus the entire club owning it. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But first, I want to talk about, how did we get here? How did it get to the point where Nick and the team at Charlotte FC said, we need a chief fan officer? Again, it's not that they understand it and nobody else understands it, but what was it about your background that made them say, we want to go with you? And what was it about them carving out this position specifically? What drove them to do that?
Yeah, I can't speak on the complete thought process when it came to creating this position, because I wasn't here. What I know
For sure.
is that Nick, pretty early on, when he was brought on as president, he had this vision for this role. Something I can speak on as far as the club is, this club is always bold, ambitious, creative, wants to push boundaries, wants to do things a little bit different. And this is one of many examples of that. And so, as far as my qualifications, because they had hundreds and hundreds of applications spanning from a wide variety of candidates, whether they were influencers, whether they were sales folks, whether they were marketing folks, inside sports industry, outside sports industry. So for me in particular, what I think makes me a great candidate for this is both my experience in this industry, 12, 13 years in the pro sports world, working on the front office, on both the revenue side, experience on the operations side. My most recent role was overseeing a professional franchise in minor league hockey, influencing every area of the business, whether it was sponsorship, ticket sales, marketing, community relations, communications. So for me, I had that business background that I can speak to each area, because this position is working with everybody. So, and then the other piece is that I'm a passionate soccer fan. I grew up in Italy. I grew up playing the sport. It's part of who I am and how I identify as a human being and my culture. And so, that combo I think aligned pretty well for this role because I understand, soccer culture. I understand the nuances of the game and the relationship between fans and club, but then I bring that piece of the business too.
I think that piece is going to be one of the key things that a lot of people miss if they try to replicate this role is you got to hire somebody. If you're going to go work with the ticket office, you better understand how a ticket office operates, what their KPIs are, and how they make money. Because if you're just bringing the voice of the fan, they're going to overwhelm you with all their systems and processes,
Yep.
and you're going to default to them. But I think
Yep.
because you have that experience, it makes you it's totally different than just being a liaison between the fan and the team. That is not what you are, is what I'm getting from this conversation.
Yeah, and again, I'm not a paid fan, and so I think
Right,
that's the
right.
important piece. Is I bring that business and not just business, but sports business experience. So for me, I've been particularly because most of my roles have been on the fan side, on ticket sales side, where I'm accustomed to having both difficult conversations, with fans, and then conversations about how do we grow our fan base and what are they saying and hearing. And so I think that experience lends itself pretty well for this type of position.
No
But then
doubt.
it's just as important to have somebody that also understands the game because I think, in just past experiences, when you have folks that maybe are just great business minds, but don't necessarily understand because sports business is different. Like, our product is evolving, it changes. Our consumers live and breathe, and there's this dynamic and this interesting woven relationship. It's not just a consumed product. So I think sometimes it can be hard to understand. And if you don't have somebody that understands that, it's that balance of understanding the business and, that sacredness of being a fan.
We always talk about it here as like we kind of use the analogy of what happens on the pitch or on the field or on the court is your product. But if Apple had as inconsistent a product as we sometimes do on the field, nobody would ever buy that phone.
Yep.
So we've got to somehow do a lot extra to make sure that, hey, even when our product is bad, we're still creating emotional connections with our fans to have them trump what's the rational decision of watching it at home or not watching it at all to somehow get them back in the venue. Shawn, I want to talk a little bit about how you got here in the interview process. I've heard you talk about this a little bit before, but for our listeners that haven't, it seemed like the interview process that you went through to get this role was really unique because you didn't just interview with people inside the organization. Talk about some of the different groups that they put you through to interview with.
Yeah, and the interview process to me spoke a lot about this role, but again, going back to this club and for me doing things, the quote unquote right way and separating themselves from what other teams do, and certainly different from any experience that I've had from an interview standpoint. But I of course spoke with folks from different departments internally, but then spoke with some of our largest partners and making sure that my values, what I was going to bring to the table aligned, and then the opportunity to speak with some of our lead supporters, folks that run and oversee some of our biggest supporter groups. And so for me, again, like those are the folks that I'm going to be working so closely between. And I say, a lot of times it almost seems as if I may have two bosses, right? I've got the fans, our fans, our supporters, our partners, and then I've got my front office boss, and it's that liaison between both and managing both relationships. And so, that the club understood that and wanted to make sure to include them on that process was really unique. A lot of teams say they care about fans or their partners, but really bringing them in on that process takes it a step further. So I had never been a part of an interview process like that.
Well, I know you've talked with some of them after the fact, and you've been in this role now for about a month. Is that right?
Yep. Yeah.
What has been some of their reaction? Because I got to imagine if in that role, once I got the job, first question I'd ask them, I'd go back and be like, dude, what was it like interviewing me? Like, what was that? What was that process like? So in those post conversations? Have they been grateful for that opportunity to get involved in it? What were their feelings on the other side of the coin?
Yeah, no, grateful for sure. I think they all understood how unique of an opportunity that was, and that that doesn't happen. And I've even reiterated that because they've heard me tell this story like that just doesn't happen, and I think they understood that from the start. So. And each moment, especially in this situation where we are building a franchise, everything for us is going to be a first time, and so that made it even extra special for them to be included on bringing not only this club's first time chief fan officer, but the first of its kind period. So they were certainly grateful for that.
So what are some of their expectations? I mean, I think one of the challenges, if I'm a team considering this, one of the challenges I would say is, well, we don't want to set expectations too high amongst our fans or amongst our corporate partners. We don't want to set that bar too high for their expectations. So what are their expectations with your role existing and knowing that they've got a go-to here that they can go to whenever?
Yeah, well, first I'll say as a club, I think we've been accustomed to setting expectations pretty high from the bat. So I don't think we shy away from lofty expectations. But I've made sure to set some expectations with our supporters and our fans. First off, my job isn't just to appease them. So it isn't, hey, you ask for something and you're going to get it. I've been pretty clear, and they understand that a great idea may not always be implemented. For me, and a lot of times, just as any person would, they just want to be heard most of the time. And my promise was that I was going to be there to listen, and so I try to respond and engage to every single message. That being my promise that I was going to listen to them, and they may not always get what they want, but being able to have that perspective in the moment is really important for me. So when we make decisions, when we launch things, I am listening, I am hearing it, and I'm bringing that back. But they know that we may not always make the changes that they want to see in the moment. But a big part of it too is when I'm able to have dialogue with them, I'm always going to help bring them in as far as understanding why we're making certain decisions. Mm-hmm. So they understand when we as a club do something that maybe initially they don't necessarily get, they can start to understand why we do things.
That makes total sense. Let's talk about your vision for what you actually want to accomplish in the role. One of the exercises that we do, and we're working with organizations around kind of purpose and where do we want to go and vision, is an exercise called kind of a destination postcard. So if you were kind of writing a postcard to yourself from the future, right? And you're saying, hey, this is the vision of where we want to be going forward. What's your vision for what you want to accomplish? And is it maybe about the supporters, how they view the organization? I'll leave it open-ended for you, but what's your vision for what you want to accomplish in the role?
Yeah, no, that's such a good question, and the interesting part about this role, and I've said, is that it's one that because it's so unique. David, if I was a CRO, like I would know exactly, like, hey, 100%. Here are my KPIs. Here's what I'm doing every single day. I've done it. I know what it is. Great. Here's that pathway. This position is so unique, where it's both thrilling because of that opportunity to kind of guide it. Whoever was going to be in this role, it was going to be different. Whether it was myself or anybody else, it was going to be based on that person's experience, who they were, their attitude, personality. And part of that's scary because it's not being able to fall back on the guidelines of, I know exactly, as a VP of ticket sales, I know exactly what we're supposed to be doing day in and day out. So for me, I mean, when I think of big picture, where we want to ultimately be, I mean, one is the supporter relationship. I want to make sure that because it is so nuanced around the world, and there are there are instances even around our league where the relationship between supporters and front office can oftentimes be fractured. and it leads to nothing positive. It's rarely positive for the supporters, where some supporters may be seeing declines both in attendance and impact, and it's certainly not helpful for the club. And so for me, probably priority number one is making sure that there's never that fracture, that even when we may come to a head and we may not agree on something, that we always have that open lines of communication. But that all stems from your buzzword, your authentic relationship. It's literally like understanding and getting to know these people on a human level. And so that's something that I'm really, really keyed in on, just making sure we're always talking. So that's one. And then certainly from a match day experience. So when you walk into our building, it's special. It's unique. It's a little bit different. Certainly driven by the fans, but my push to our supporters is not necessarily living in a box, an MLS box, and not seeing necessarily what other teams are doing in our league, but pushing themselves outside of those boundaries and finding ways to create a really, really unique game experience, so that when anybody, whether they're a soccer fan or not, comes into our matches, it's unique and special.
Can you give us an example of what that means around like unique and special specifically? I mean, I know you've only been there for a month, and so you're still in this heavy data collection mode. You always will be a little bit of that. But can you give us an example of like some of the things that have come out of these conversations that you would look at it and say, wow, that's unique and special to our fan base?
Yeah, so things like chants. For instance, there are a lot of chants around the league that are pretty cut and paste.
Yep.
Hey, you hear that tune, you hear that jingle, you hear that song. Every team uses it. They may just change one word. So things like that. Tifos is one. Like, hey, we don't have to just do your traditional MLS pull-up banner tifo. Like, let's look at choreography around the world. How do they incorporate stunt cards? How do they incorporate different elements that maybe goes above and beyond just what you see from a lot of teams? And there are a couple MLS teams that do a really, really good job of thinking outside the box. Soccer is so unique because it is so fan-driven, but that doesn't mean we can't look to really great NHL and NBA teams for things that connect and land well in terms of fans. And now how do we find a way to incorporate our supporters so that they're still involved and that it's, again, a little bit of a different experience? So again, I'm pushing them to think and look at not just soccer, not just MLS, but finding things that teams do really well, because there's some really, really great experiences. Like when I've gone to different NHL teams that I've seen.
Give me names.
Like the Vegas Golden Knights.
Okay.
Some of the stuff that they do, they lean into who they are. They lean into that city, and they're unapologetic about it, and they're going to lean into it, and they really create this incredible show, that in its entirety probably doesn't work for us. But the concept for me, what I love about what Vegas does, it's almost as if they have this mindset of every game is almost like an inaugural match for them. They bring it. Hey, look, we may have 5,000 tourists in the building who have all heard about how incredible our game atmosphere is. Doesn't matter that they're in the 5th season and it's the 10th regular season game. They want to live up to that. And so I have never been disappointed when I've been out to one of their games. I've always left as if it was something special, even when maybe it wasn't. And so for me, I take that mindset, like, we want to do something incredible for our inaugural match, but I also need to make sure that from match 1 to 2, there isn't this extreme drop-off where people leave our first game and think it was badass, it was incredible, they tell their friends come for game 2, and it was, mediocre or cookie cutter. So, I'm keeping that top of mind.
I love that mindset of it's almost like the Amazon Jeff Bezos day one mentality of every game, bring it like it's your inaugural match. I love that example. Are there any other teams that you look to or experiences that you look to specifically that you're maybe trying to encourage your guys to pull inspiration from?
I mean, look, I think really for me, because soccer is all about the representation of your city, your state, your community. So honestly, like one of the questions I'll go in asking literally everybody that I meet here, that's local, even transients and transplants, I'm asking them the question, what is Charlotte? What is it? What is it? What is it? What does it mean to be from here? What do you want it to mean? You know, I think that's an important question. When somebody says Charlotte, what do you think they think? What do you want them to think? So for me, again, because a lot of people when they think about a soccer match, especially your quote unquote Euro snobs here in the U.S., and it's always interesting to me because they'll look to an experience in England and they may say this is what soccer is supposed to look like. My pushback is that's what soccer is supposed to look like in England, and that's their representation. You know, having grown up in Italy, like we have calcio, and it looks and feels a certain way because that's representative of our people, our community, and so I want to make sure that we're again going back to look. We don't have to do things a way that's being done just because we see a top league in England is doing that. So my question is always, what is Charlotte? What are the Carolinas? What does it represent? So that we can start finding ways to create that connection.
Are there specific topics or constraints that you're trying to get them to challenge on to really pull what's special about Charlotte? Because I think for a lot of cities, it's easy to say, high level, hey, let's find what's special about our city and let's emulate that in the stadium. But without the constraints, you kind of get this esoteric thing that's not really specific. So are there specific topics or categories that you're looking to get to basically bring to life your city in the stadium?
So, how I guess is your question,
like
David?
I guess my question is like food, music, like what are the kind of categories?
Precisely all of that. Hey, even from the choreography and tifos that we display, from food, from music, from entertainment, like is this city a DJ town? Like, is it what type of music? I mean, what do people want to see? Our tailgate experience, how's that set up? What does that look like? Yeah. And even for how we market, what is that going to look and sound like? What's our language? All of that is important. And so making sure that, again, when you walk into our building, you feel it's unique to the Carolinas. A lot of times I walk into an NBA building, and I'm a huge NBA guy, but I can walk into a lot of buildings across the country and they all feel the same. It's your same music, your same video board template. It's all roughly the same experience by and large.
I think there's definitely a way you can get more specific and really dial in, like to your point. One club I think that does a really good job of this in the MLS specifically is the brand new club down in Austin. I think they've done a great job, and granted, they've got a city that has a lot of unique features to it inherently built in. But even when it came down to the way that they deliver customer service, so we helped them kind of design all of their guest service and training and how they wanted it to feel different. And one of their standards was BeVerde. And it was really about calling out and recognizing all the unique personalities that are going to come into the building and kind of acknowledging all those different things and having a different way of engaging with different fans. They designed that from the jump because they knew their city is unique and different and weird.
Yeah.
So you can go, I think, a lot of different directions with this. I'm excited to see what you and the team come up with.
The challenge for us is it's such a what I hear from everyone is that it's such a city in transition, and it's a city that's growing really, really fast. A lot of transplants. So it's been interesting because the question, what is Charlotte and what does it mean to you? And that answer, it's hard to get an answer, and so that makes it a really, really big challenge.
It might be interesting too for you to talk with all the guys down at Orlando City and the Orlando Magic. Obviously, I mean that's where I'm from, having worked at Disney for a long time. And there is the challenge there of having a transient city where you're like, how do we make it so that it's not just an away game every home game where the other
Right.
team's fans are coming in stronger than our own fans.
Yep.
But I think
Which
if
we have an
anybody's, go ahead.
opportunity in
Yeah.
terms of bringing fan for us. I mean, that's also the massive opportunity because when you're when you're an NFL fan, like there's so many diehard NFL fans that are moving into the Carolinas and coming to Charlotte. It's really hard to give that up, to support another NFL team or an NBA team. For us, soccer's still new in this country. MLS is still new, so you're not going to see a ton of people that have this deep-rooted tradition and history of having a relationship with an MLS club. So I think for us, that's really the opportunity to be a unifier of the Carolinas, and hopefully, again, we don't see a building full of opposing team fans. And look, I lived in transient cities and in Houston and Phoenix where you would see jerseys just completely outnumbering, the home team. And so for us, I'm hopeful that that's not the case because this is the chance for people that aren't from here, like myself, to claim stake to a team here in your backyard where you're living that can bring people together. So for me, that is the hope.
Beautiful. Well, let's get into some of the nitty gritty here. I want to talk about more so the structure internally, maybe from like an org chart perspective, et cetera. Because I think if I'm listening to this and I'm an executive at a team, whether it's an athletic department or a pro team, this sounds really cool, a chief fan officer, but this is not just a coordinator role. So talk to us a little bit about truly structurally, like who are you reporting into? Do you have diagonal lines on the reporting chart? Where do you sit in the organization?
Yeah, I report directly to our president, Nick Kelly. Again, in terms of having that voice or reporting structure, it goes to the top man here, and so making sure obviously he hears all of it, and I'm in every meeting, so with marketing, with ticket sales, with you name it.
So on that note, right? I mean, important for anybody listening, this is a senior level role within the club. And I think it has to be that way if you really are going to be brought into different conversations about when do we do season ticket renewals? What does that process look like? How do we bring in this corporate sponsor or not? Is this going to resonate with our fans? You've got to be at a senior level to be able to influence those decisions and be invited into those conversations. Talk to us a little bit about, you said you're in a bunch of meetings. When we think about the percentage, are you just hopping around into different meetings? Are you hosting your own meetings that people come into? Maybe talk about some of the recurring meetings that you've got on your calendar.
Yeah, I mean it's certainly a combo of both. So I've set some of my own recurring meetings with
and what do those look like? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, so things like our business intelligence team and pulling data and seeing and hearing what's going on from just an analytics standpoint. Hey, what's our demographic? Or we're hosting events all the time, and so understanding who's attending these events, show rate, why, what's response look like, what's the when I'm meeting with the ticket sales team, it's what are we hearing? What's our largest objections? Our business analytics team is able to pull some of that through CRM and understanding what they're looking and seeing. So, but then again, when we've got meetings that aren't recurring, whether it's a new ticket launch or whether we've got a major announcement coming up and we're kind of regrouping with the department heads from each department, I'm a part of that. And so I'm getting to hear, listen, and then have my input. For me, it's really important though that every department head is leading. So it's not. I don't see it as my place to make every decision and to drive the bus on every single meeting. But certainly have my voice and my opinions in each one.
Yep. Well, let's talk about some of the meetings that you do with fans. I think aspirationally, a lot of teams say.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we'd love to go hear what the fans say, but there are rarely any um, designed meetings. They're more so, oh, I got stopped by a fan in the grocery store and they wanted to vent and tell me how they think. Talk to me about some of these meetings that you're setting up with fans or events that you're going to. What does the structure of those events look like? How do you go about setting those up?
Yeah, so we've got some different buckets of fans in terms of how they engage with us. So, like our supporters group, with them, I currently meet with them on a bi-weekly basis, and so that meeting is pretty structured. We're on the front end. I will come prepared with club announcements, ideas, learnings. I took a trip out west last week to visit some different venues, take notes, see what I liked, what I didn't like, and just I was so we had one of our supporter biweekly meetings last night, and part of that was me sharing some of my findings and where my mind directionally is going, and to gauge their feelings on whether or not they like some of my ideas, what their thoughts are, and then giving them opportunities to have feedback. And so I was also able to, on each stop that I had, I actually brought out a member of our supporters group with me.
Wow.
So that again, building that relationship, getting them the opportunity to see. Some of them may have never been to an MLS match, may have never been to an NHL game, and so getting to sit down with them, get their feedback in live conversation, in the moment with them as well, I thought was really, really helpful. And so these meetings, again, I'll come prepared with club notes, anything that's happened, updates, and then directionally things that I'm leaning towards, and giving them the opportunity to obviously be a part of that conversation. And then it's a handoff then to them. What do you guys want to hear? What's going on? What events do you have coming up? What support do you need from the club? And certainly we end every single meeting with action items. So to do from my end, like what do they need me to do, and whether or not I may have some homework assignment for them as well. And so those have been really helpful. And then we've got some monthly meetings as well with a group that we call our community captains. So these are folks that have raised their hands. They are community leaders, both in their respective geographic location or their industry spaces, that maybe don't necessarily want to be part of a supporters group. Some of them aren't even season ticket members. Maybe they're unable to because they live 3 hours away. But these are folks that want to see this club succeed, and so we meet with them pretty frequently. And then we've got conversations. We've got WhatsApp threads with them where they're literally communicating to us, and I'm like, we see those messages nonstop. We're responding. We're creating conversations on ways that because we don't know what we don't know, and so as a club, you're always limited on resources, whether it's staff, time, money.
Yeah.
And so what they're doing is they're helping us when it comes to our blind spots. Are there events that we're missing? Are there opportunities where we can enhance and be somewhere? And so are there nonprofits? Are there causes that we can be a part of? And so they are, from a leadership standpoint, they're going out there in the community and helping us be a part of it, so that we don't miss. And so that's been really, really helpful as well.
When we think about this, like kind of internally, I think sometimes when we work with more, let's call it traditional sports and entertainment organizations, this tends to happen in the college space a little bit more. They're really hesitant to share ideas with fans. Like, oh, if we tell a fan that, they're going to leak it, it's going to be on a message board, and we're going to get blowback before we even had a chance to really give that idea a chance. It seems like you guys aren't scared about that, but maybe like just thinking back to last night's meeting, I mean, what was one idea that was shared? And what are the types of ideas and things that are the exchange that's going back and forth between you guys? Like, give me specific example or two.
Yeah, well, I'll take a step back and I'll say first, kind of my mindset when it comes to having any reservations on leaks. Again, it all goes back to a relationship, and so I can't think about all the bad things that may happen. It's a relationship. Again, I equate it to marriage. Honestly, I can't go into it thinking the worst. We got to be on the same page. And so when it comes to our supporters and having these conversations, this is a privilege. I am giving you some information. And this relationship is it's special, and I think they understand that. And so I don't go into it super concerned. Obviously, as a front office, there are things that we can't say for sure. But I try to be as transparent as possible, especially with that group. So when it comes to ideas, I mean, literally building out our match day, I'm having those conversations. Like, hey, what if here's something I really liked with Vegas. What if we did that? What if we incorporated a DJ? I know teams aren't doing that. Like, what are your guys' thoughts on that piece? Hey, I know it's not a soccer thing, but what if we did X, Y, and Z? Hey, what if we leaned into this theme a little bit and had, I don't want to give away too much, but had, something in the supporter section that, and they've been really great because I've been open, honest, and I always try to explain my why behind it and allow them into my thought process. So it's not just, hey, we want to do this, what do you think? It's, hey, I was here. Here's what my brain was kind of how it was working and everything was clicking. And I came to this. I think it's beneficial because of X, Y, and Z. What do you guys think? And that's been really, really helpful. And they've been incredible when it comes to listening, providing feedback, and really being open to being different. And again, that was my challenge to them from the start. So I think that we've set the tone to try to push boundaries a little bit.
I think what you just said is so key. Is not just saying, hey, here's our plan, give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down. This is the way we always phrase stuff with fans is, let's have some dialogue around it. What are the pros? What are the cons? Really having dialogue and not just giving it a positive or negative evaluation. I love that. I want to shift gears a little bit to talking about this supporter to supporter connection that you're trying to foster. I've heard you talk about this before around ultimately how do we create a space where supporters are engaging with each other and building true community as opposed to just having an audience that follows us. How do you see the difference between community versus audience and fostering these supporter to supporter connections? How are you going about doing that?
So we've got a number of different supporter groups, and so for me, I mean, it's not just important that I'm communicating with them, because again, I create some structure that's happening, but probably if as important, if not more, is that they're communicating with each other. And right now, early into our tenure, we've got a really positive supporter to supporter relationship. They're included. Not only do we speak bi-weekly, but we have a thread. We have a message thread that we are all in with every single supporters group. So they're leaders of their group, myself, and we're literally messaging each other throughout the day, whether it's ideas, issues, challenges, thoughts, as random as you want it to be, or as keyed in on a specific subject as you want it to be. And so that's really important. And then I challenge them pretty frequently to not always wait on the club to do things, so that they're working together on whether it's creating an event, whether it's opportunities for them to go out and practice. And so making sure that they're having that dialogue with each other and not just waiting for me to create it, but they do a really good job of it, and I've been really impressed at how positive that can be, because I've seen supporters from other teams that are a little bit more fractured, from even the location where they sit. I've seen supporters groups that are literally on opposite ends of a stadium, which again does no service, because when you look at it from an outside of a supporters group perspective, when you want to talk about a fan base, it's not, hey, this supporters group was incredible. It's the supporters from whatever team, and most people don't even know the names of each separate group. They're just a collective. So if there's fracture and they're not bringing it on match day, then they all look bad. And when they are bringing it, they all look good. So regardless of if a supporters group has 20 members or 1,000, they're all collectively one unit. So we've had those conversations, and they do a really nice job of speaking to each other, and they help support each other too. So there's one supporters group that'll go out and they'll support some of the USL clubs here, some of the lower division clubs here locally, and they'll invite some of the others, and they do a nice job of showing up. That they have ties within the community and some nonprofits as well, and they've done a nice job helping each other raise money for those causes and cross collaborating. So it's been positive to see.
I love it. And I think what you're doing is it honestly helps the marketing team so much, because the more that the supporters can engage with each other, the more that they're keeping the brand front of mind. And that's time spent that your marketing team doesn't have to engage in, right? Like you're kind of creating it so that people are always thinking about Charlotte FC, and you're not even necessarily doing anything because you've created these interwoven connections amongst the fans. I love it, and I'm excited to see it come to life here soon. All right, I want to talk a little bit about KPIs and how you are actually evaluating this. So we mentioned earlier, hey, if you were a CRO, it'd be really easy. You'd have some sales goals, you'd have some sponsorship revenue that you'd have to hit. At the end of the day, I mean, you've probably got some sort of performance review, and I know it's going to evolve, but what are some of those initial KPIs that you're looking at to say, yes, I'm doing a good job as a chief fan officer, or not?
Yeah, I mean, as a club, we collectively stand by a couple. I mean, one for our inaugural match, we want to break the record for the largest MLS match in league history. So we've talked about that as a group internally. We've talked about it externally. So again, my role here involves every department. So that's a big one. We want to average 30,000 fans a game, and so again, part of creating that culture and having a really great experience, that's going to lend to what our attendance looks like, and something that I don't directly influence is what we want to do on the pitch, but it all matters. So for us, it's hosting a home playoff game as well in year one. So as an organization, we planted our flag on those three major goals. So, for me, falling short on any of those, means I've missed somewhere as well.
Are you guys going to be running surveys and focusing on kind of net promoter scores or customer experience scores or anything like that? How are you thinking about it from that perspective?
Yeah, we'll do a lot of that as well. And some of that has been done prior to me getting here, and making sure that data is in our CRM system, and that it's extrapolated in a way that I can see and read easy. And so that stuff is important. That stuff is one of many things that we're doing on top of me having conversations and the DMs, the Twitter, the phone calls, all of that.
Beautiful. All right, well, we've got about 10 minutes here. Let's talk a little bit about leadership. Obviously, you're in a unique position where, do you have any direct reports, by the way?
I do have one direct report. So at the moment, I've got one direct, and then again, working okay. Cross collaboratively with everyone.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the thing, right? You're leading a bunch of different groups, even if not from a straight line on the org chart. You're kind of having to rally troops, both fans and internal stakeholders that are working for the organization. So let's talk a little bit about your leadership style. Right before we jumped on, you said, I know we're going to talk a little bit about leadership. I've got some hot takes. Let's start there. I mean, what were you about to jump into and say, hey, I do leadership a little bit differently?
Yeah, I mean, so I've led sales departments, and for me, I've always really keyed in on the human element first, above KPIs. And for me, I think obviously KPIs are important. Obviously revenue targets, all of it's important. They're clearly defined. I believe in having goals that are clearly defined and that everybody understands their roles. But if you're not connected with the people that'll get you there, then it's going to be really, really hard. And so for me, it's all about. I say this with our fans, like it truly is about a relationship, and so that's just as important from club to fan as it is from leader to staff, regardless of where the lines are directed. So for me, I mean, that's always been my focus, and making sure as a leader that I'm not only am I making sure that there aren't roadblocks, but that I am actively thinking about myself and in the sense that I am not one of those roadblocks. So I'm a big believer in making sure that I hire really great people and that I allow them to do their jobs, but I have to proactively be cognizant that I am not one of those roadblocks that's getting in the way from them doing their jobs.
How do you go about assessing whether you are one of those roadblocks or not? Because I think a lot of times
it's asking, honestly, and again, it's easy just to ask a question and then maybe not get a real answer, but it all goes back to relationship. And I know it's corny, it's easy to say, but that's literally the everyday dynamic. So for me, culture, everybody wants to talk about culture, and when they talk about culture, they may there's fun tchotchke things that you can do, and there's you can ring the bell, you can have contests, and you can talk about fun things that you're doing that you want to post on LinkedIn. But that's not the everyday stuff, and some of that stuff is important and it's fun and it can help with team building and team morale. But if you've got a really crappy culture and you don't care about your people and the day-to-day is difficult and challenging, that stuff's not going to help. So for me, it's honestly, it really is about relationships. It's about having real conversations. It's I talk about being transparent with my supporters. I mean, more transparent with the teams that I've managed and making sure that they understand where I'm coming from, why we're making certain decisions, what's going on in my life, and and just being human, so that I can have honest conversations. Am I being a roadblock? What's getting in your way? How can I help? And making sure that I follow through, when they're sharing information and asking me for things, that I am that resource. So I think that's something that we so often as leaders forget, is we're so keyed in on goals and how do we get there and how do we achieve these numbers, and we forget that the only way we're going to get there is with people. And so if we're not taking care of those people and keeping them top of mind, and look, if we miss a goal, we miss a goal, as long as collectively, like, we've all done what we can do. And I think it's about knowing when to press certain buttons. I think this industry is tough, and we've got long seasons, some longer than others, but they're long. It's not a traditional 9 to 5 Monday through Friday. And so I think a challenge I see around the industry is leaders always pressing go, go, go. And that's just not physically possible. So you see a lot of burnouts. Nobody's glued to the computer 12 hours a day, like literally producing nonstop. And so it is my job as a leader to make sure that I'm keeping people sane, that I'm providing opportunities for those breaks. Like, I used to have my staff play FIFA midday, and for me, like, I don't know, maybe I was the one disrupting their day, as the leader. But it'd be like, let's play some FIFA. Like, what you guys have been making phone calls all day, like, that's just, you get exhausted. And so as a leader, I want to make sure to be the one that tells them it's okay to take a break and to recharge those batteries a little bit. And I need to be smart about when I want to press those buttons, because there's a shelf life if you continue pressing and running.
Yeah, you can't completely always have the pedal to the floor. Like that just can't be what happens. You're going to burn your people out. And to your point, I mean, if your Twitter feed looks anything like mine, it is just filled with guys and girls our age right now being like, deuces, I'm leaving sports. I'm going to take a job at a printing company or something
Yep.
crazy that you're like, that would have never happened 15 years ago.
Right.
But I think it's to the point right now where teams are just demanding so much content, so much output, but we haven't reinvested the growth and revenues back into our people and into our cultures.
Yeah, and the other
At least in the
challenge is
sports
that
space.
we feel like we're competing with other sports teams for talent, and so it's like, hey, here's the salaries in sports, or here's the culture across sports, but we're not losing great talent to other sports teams. We're losing them to technology, every other industry in the books. Like, so for me, it's why are we looking at one another and keeping ourselves like down here when we need to be looking at what some of the best companies around the world are doing and making sure that we push ourselves to create a culture that keeps that talent.
No question. And hopefully, right, that's what we're doing with this podcast, where sometimes we have leaders in sport like yourself that come on, but a lot of times we're bringing in leaders from outside the industry to showcase what are their best practices in customer experience or employee experience. And then let's apply those things to sport. Because again, sometimes we just look so insular and we just look at, you're right, we look at the other teams, we say, what are they doing? And we completely ignore that that's not our only option for our employees or for our fans. Our fans can spend their dollars other places as well. So, well, this has been great. I've loved having you on. Any final pieces of advice for our audience, specifically within the context of if they're trying, if a senior leader at a sports entertainment organization is really trying to engage deeper with their fans, maybe they're considering putting in somebody whose full-time job it is to look out and be the voice for the fans. What advice would you give these senior leaders?
Yeah, I mean, one, it's got to be a full-time job, a full-time investment. You've got to get somebody that understands the business side, but also, again, truly understands that sport, the connection with the fans, and then you've got to give them authority. You've got to give them a voice that matters. Otherwise, fans are going to see through it pretty quickly. Otherwise you're just a supporter liaison, and those positions exist. So I think it's really giving the person the ability to empower him or herself to make decisions. So I think that's really key.
Beautiful. Shawn, it has been great having you on the show. Really looking forward to our next conversation, and best of luck in the coming months.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. I look forward to the next one.
Thanks, everybody, for listening. We'll see y'all soon.
Hey guys, before you head out, just wanted to say thank you so much for listening to the show. If you enjoyed it, head over to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. That helps more of your peers find the show as they search for ways to get better in their own roles. But this podcast is just a small part of what we do at EngageMint. In our normal day in the office, we're crazy focused on helping athletic departments and sports and entertainment companies generate more revenue by becoming more customer-centric. To see how we might be able to help your organization, visit engagementpartners.com to learn more. Download a free guide, check out our blogs and case studies, or schedule a call with us if you want to see how we can help with your particular objectives. Our goal is to help you create deeper connections with fans and generate more revenue. So when you're with us, hopefully you find a nugget or two that helps your cause.